first thing that came to my mind was when you're in elementary school and there's the one little fat kid and he gets picked on because, you know, he's different than everybody else and he's a little bigger and, you know, the other kids can push him around and stuff, and so they take stuff and they throw it around or they push him. And that was my first impression. And then I kept thinking about it throughout the day, and I sort of started looking at it more in a global context. And I started thinking about, you know, conflicts all over the world where large masses of people are, you know, almost not even thought about or thought about as the enemy in their own country and sort of attempted to be pushed out. One instance is, you know, in Colombia, the period of La Violencia, when the conservatives and the liberals were in civil war over assassinations and elections. And, you know, eventually the liberals boycotted the elections and the civil war started because they felt like they were not being represented, and, you know, thousands upon thousands were killed over this. And I mean, it was things like that that started passing through my head. Another one, more recent, was the Ukrainian elections, where the Russians, where Vladimir Putin supposedly tampered with the elections and, you know, caused the conservative pro-Russian candidate to win over the liberal Ukrainian candidate. And this was, you know, an example of how an outside force, the Russians, you know, came in and sort of fixed the elections to match their own wills in the global market, the global economy in general, and influence another country. And so all of these things include, I mean, you could just go on and on for hours upon hours of just conflicts within and outside of countries where one group is, you know, sort of, you know, harassed by another. I mean, Iraq right now with the Shia and the Sunnis, and, you know, it used to be the Sunnis were in power and the Shias and the Kurds were all, you know, excluded against, and they were attacked and killed, and, you know, it was ridiculous. And then we overthrew Saddam, and now the Shiites are starting their own, you know, their own forces, their own death squads to go around and kill the Sunnis and eventually take over the country. So that's a very good example of how when one group is in power, the other one's excluded against, and as soon as it switches, the other group is just killed en masse. It's a more large-scale event that can be looked at much better on, you know, looking at a whole country, looking at a whole group of people, because it does happen a lot. In order for every persecution to happen, there needs to be that separation, because if there's no separation, then the sides and who's fighting who is sort of mingled. It's sort of, there's a blurred line, and you can't have that blurred line. You have to be with us or against us almost. And once that is created, that's when the violence can begin taking place.
Okay.
But as to the personal side of it, I believe that that it can happen on a personal level. I don't believe that I've experienced this. I might have seen it in grade school where, you know, kids get into fights, maybe one kid gets pushed because he's fat or because he wears glasses, something like that. However, I do not believe that I have been personally subjected to this.
Well, I'm going to read what my first reaction was. Hi Sven, is this what you anthropologists do? Come up with silly terms that will end up keeping SIS people, me, up all night thinking of the true meaning of how, if I have experienced this, and how this affects cross-cultural communications. And in parentheses, would you enroll in an upper-level cross-cultural communication class if offered? That's one of the. Do you have that on your interview, on your evaluations at the end of the semester? I hope so. Back to the project. I was speaking of other things. I'm trying to think of what violent exclusion could mean. Other people could be other people really, really not wanting you to be a part of something, kids on the playground not explaining to me what an inside joke was in 3rd grade, and I was out of the loop. Or a group using actual force to keep you away, guards outside an embassy. Or violent used interchangeably as extreme. And then the rest of it was just silly. Violent exclusion seems to be, I took it in the way of meaning extreme, because I couldn't think of a situation that I was personally in that was violent. I haven't really experienced violence where I'm beat up and broken and bleeding, so that's good. But violent exclusion. So I was thinking of it in the extreme term. And the only thing I could really think of that was so extreme was back when my sister was going into preschool, and she has Down syndrome. So that was before, it was just before they had the IDEA, it's the Individuals with Disability Education Act, where it said that all kids with disabilities were able to go to school, and the school had to come up with ways to include them. So she wasn't allowed to go to preschool, and it was where I went to preschool. So it was kind of, wait, my preschool's not letting my sister in? Why? I couldn't quite figure it out because I was only in 2nd grade. So she ended up having to come out of her class and be excluded from all the kids in her class and then go to another preschool. And it worked out because the other preschool was great, but that was the only example that I can think of. My parents were trying so hard. They wanted to get a lawyer into this just to try to change the system, but it didn't work out. So then the IDEA Act came in and kind of fixed the problem to an extent. So violent exclusion, yes. Everyone violently excludes others at some point, even if it is just in your head. But sometimes it gets to the point where it builds up and it builds up and it becomes so normal in your head that you're building up these thoughts of, I don't really like them anymore and I just kind of don't want to be around them. And I really do think that violent exclusion is, we have to exclude people for our own well-being, because there's some people that I guess you're just not meant to be around and are not going to be a good thing for your life at that moment, and or that they were great for a certain point but then you both changed and you're just not good to be around each other anymore. So violent exclusion would be those extreme thoughts in your head of, I can't stand this anymore, I can't stand this, I need to get out of this situation. So to say that everyone should be happy and get along, and that'd be great. That would be really wonderful. I'd really like that. But I don't think that that's what it's really meant to be. So you have to distance yourself from some people, and that's the way to go. And that's okay, because that happens. It happens all